Hello, I'm Liz Lumley of Finextra, and joining me today are David Bosomworth, Roger Gate, and Michael Davison, all three of you from IBM. And we're going to have a discussion about security and security inside banks. And we had a bit of a chinwag before we sat down in the studio about what that actually means. What does security inside banks mean? So I'm going to really start off with you, Michael, because operational and data security has gained a lot of attention recently inside banks. So why is that?
Well, I think there have been so many recent headlines about breaches of data that not just limited to the United Kingdom, but indeed all around the world. In the last week alone, we've had further data breaches in Asia, in South Korea, and the United States, as well as elsewhere in Europe. So it's simply the pace and the number, the volume of these attacks seems to be growing, and there is a great deal of public concern because of other related data leakages which are nothing to do with financial services. So it's really at the top of the global agenda.
So, I mean, that really kind of brings up issues, especially when talking about banks, with issues of trust and customer trust. So, Roger, I'm going to move on to you to talk about, how does these discussions around security, how does this enhance, the overall customer experience and the customer trust?
I think trust is obviously extremely important, and achieving trust means that you've actually got to understand how you're going to deliver secure services. You've actually got to understand how the customer will actually consume those services, and also understand the demographics of the people that you're actually aiming those services at, because some of them will have different views of what is secure or not secure and how you achieve that security. So I always say that you should actually view security as an enabler, something that enables you to do the business or the service that you want to deliver, and then actually start right at the beginning with that in mind. So that's part of the initial discussion about how the service will operate. It's part of the discussion as to how you architect it. It's part of the design. It's worked on all the way through the development life cycle, so that it's built in to what is delivered to the customer. And as you go through that, you can involve the customer, you can make sure that they understand what the security is that is being delivered, how it's being delivered, and then you can actually build that into the customer experience testing that you're doing. So that you make sure that at the end, it's not just secure, it's security that the customer, A, recognizes, and B, doesn't have a problem with actually interacting with to deliver that security.
So, I mean, Michael talked a bit about why security issues are now a big priority at banks. So maybe I can continue on with you, Roger, about how has the approach to security inside banks changed? I mean, is sort of a piecemeal approach still workable today?
I think to an extent it has been a piecemeal approach, and that, if you like, has grown up because of the systems that the banks currently have in place, and then putting in point solutions to protect against particular threats, etc. But I think more and more banks are recognizing that you need a far more integrated approach, both to actually gather the data that allows you to look intelligently at what attacks are happening, etc. But also perhaps looking at the security components that you deliver, so authorization, authentication, access control, etc., as a service within the bank. So by abstracting those into a single layer, you can actually drive out efficiency, but also much more quickly adapt your services and your applications to make use of them and be more secure in the process. And that also delivers from that layer a level of information and intelligence that you can then incorporate with the rest of your information and look at to actually understand the deeper threats that you may face, particularly around advanced persistent threats.
So, David, I want to move on to you, and maybe if you can follow on from what Roger was talking about. I mean, what are some of the real benefits of using this sort of enterprise integrated approach to security?
I think the main thing is that if we look at what banks are trying to protect against these days, traditionally people have seen security as being the independent hacker externally trying to steal customer records, customer data, or large organizations trying to essentially stop banks from operating by using DDoS type attacks, essentially trying to swamp networks. But more and more banks now, as well as dealing with those traditional security threats, are looking to address issues such as compliance. They're addressing issues such as internal threats, whether they're from malicious or from badly trained users. So the only way to do that is by not saying, oh, these are my important servers that contain important data, therefore I'm just going to protect those, which was the traditional approach, say, over 5 years ago. But by recognizing that the whole of the network, the whole of the enterprise has sensitive data flying around it at any one time, and therefore they need to have an enterprise-wide security solution. In addition to that, I think it's a recognition by the banks and by the security industry that the more context and the more information and data we can put around this, the security information we're gathering, the more accurate we can be, which enables us to identify threats faster, remediate those threats faster, but also just make sure that we are essentially giving ourselves the best possible security posture as a bank.
So David, what are banks looking for from their security providers then?
Traditionally, banks would be looking for security partners to provide, really good technology to support the security initiatives they had, and typically then would be looking for maybe some implementation and configuration support. Less and less banks are interested in the implementation and configuration support now, and they're looking for true value-added services from their partners, specifically around details on if you like, how to provide these levels of security, what the SLAs should be. They're looking for anything up to and including a complete managed service.
I wanted to stick with you because you said something interesting where you listed some of the threats that banks are facing, and there's this sort of stereotype of the lone teenage hacker in his bedroom, attacking the big multinational bank. So, I mean, what are the real threats banks are facing outside of the stereotype? What are some of these threats?
So again, some of the threats are really about internal threats to my data. So the data there can be anything from an HR professional looking to work at home late at night and deciding to put people's CVs or people's internal HR records into a Dropbox account, for example, which obviously breaks my policy and makes that data open for threat from outside because it's an insecure data space. So anything from that all the way through to some of the large banks, for example, are using the security tools to enforce procedural or operational issues such as change management. If somebody asks, for example, for a new password because they've lost theirs, they have to go through an auditable process in order to give that new password out so that they just don't get people randomly changing passwords.
So it's sort of like that type of procedure. People don't normally think that's a security measure, but it's a procedural measure.
Yeah, exactly. So the example being, if I have the ability to change people's passwords, and I don't do it in an auditable way that fits with my regulations, then essentially I could just be changing your password so I can log in as you later on. So we need to be able to check those processes and procedures and identify the ones that fall outside of policy.
I think the key is that it's all around expertise and breadth of knowledge, and I think for the banks are finding that some of the partners have quite a lot of breadth of knowledge because they work across a number of different banks, setting up perhaps security operations centres, working with them on the risk management, working with them on the process and people side as well as the technology side. And so I think it's because at the moment in this country certainly there is quite a shortage of security people as well. It's something where the partners can help to actually deliver those things into the bank, help them to define what their approach should be and help them to actually deliver that approach across all of those disciplines.
We talked a little bit before we sat in the studio about the number of attacks or events that banks have to deal with on a daily basis. And, how fast is this world changing, these security within banks? How fast is this environment changing currently?
I think it's you know, it is, you know, changing at the speed of light, as they say. We're seeing, you know, new threats coming out all the time. You know, the way that these threats are delivered is changing. So, you know, again, in the old days, people used to look for a closely knit set of, you know, failed logons, for example, followed by a successful one, which looked like somebody repeatedly tapping in somebody's password or brute forcing the attack. But now we're seeing people that have, you know, their view is, I have a long time, I don't really care. So I can try something now, I can try it again in a month, I can try it again in 6 months. So what we're seeing is that it's not just the type of attack, but it's the delivery mechanism of that attack. The speed at which those attacks are being delivered is also changing. And so again, it's important that we don't just look at what's happened in the last 5 minutes, but that we're able to build a picture of what's happening over a significant period of time on within our networks.
So Roger, then how can banks really respond to this level of change that David just described?
Understanding the information that you have, making that information available to a system where you can actually correlate that information and actually derive real understanding of what the real threats are. You actually need to pull in information from multiple sources as much as possible, and then correlate that information, use that information to gain real understanding of where the true threats are and where the true events that could actually compromise the business are happening. But it's really getting an understanding of where there is a number of things that have happened that create an opportunity for fraud or for a data breach.
Okay, so Michael, I'll move to you to conclude our discussion. I mean, Roger and David went through a lot about what banks are facing right at the moment with security. So what's next for banks' ID departments and even their board in tackling these issues?
Well, I can't think of another issue that banks are facing, another challenge, which unites the interests of so many different people at the heads of the organisation. It unites technology, it unites the chief finance officer, it unites obviously the security and compliance functions, but interestingly also it's mission critical for people who are running lines of business, who are owning P&Ls. I can't think of another issue that's so central to all of their interests. So inevitably and rightly it sits on the board agenda. And there is still a job of work to do to educate boards as to the detail and the nature of the changing environment that Roger and David have been talking about. You know, we mustn't understate the criticality of what's going on here. The banks have been labelled critical national infrastructure for years. It's estimated, and the Cabinet Office put their name to this, that the losses ascribable just to cybersecurity are something in the order of £25 billion per annum, of which FS is at least 10%. So that's a staggering amount. And in fact, if you went back and looked at the 2012 profit pool for the 4 biggest clearing banks in the UK, that's a bigger number than they made combined. So it's a very big number, it's critical to their onward performance, and it needs to be tackled in a dynamic way.
That's great, Michael. Roger, David, thank you very much.